Vice President Pence in Poland. He begins a 4-day visit to Europe. We're on the ground in Warsaw with a look at what the vice president wants to accomplish. Budget proposal. Lawmakers are hammering out the final details of a plan to avoid another government shutdown as Friday's deadline looms. The Vatican and Venezuela. A report says Pope Francis is not ready to mediate in the political turmoil. We have reaction from Rome. And no I in Our Father, what the Holy Father says about individualism and prayer. On EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, February 13th, 2019. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Vice President Mike Pence travels overseas to rally allies against American foes. The U.S. is leading a summit on peace and security in the Middle East. The gathering has been denounced by Iran and Russia. The Pences landed today in Warsaw, where the U.S. just announced a deal to sell Poland high-tech rocket launchers. Our White House correspondent, Mark Irons, is on the ground providing coverage of the vice president's trip. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. I'm standing in front of the historic St. Anne's Church here in Warsaw, Poland. Now, today, Vice President Mike Pence spent a significant amount of time with the Catholic president of Poland. Their message was one of unity, focused on their strong alliance and military cooperation against places like Iran.
The Vice President and Second Lady Karen Pence landed in cold, windy Warsaw today with nothing but warm words for a U.S. ally.
To reflect on and to celebrate the remarkable bond that exists between our peoples and our two nations.
The Vice President greeted American and Polish service members and was briefed by U.S. military officials about the current status of U.S. troops stationed in Poland. The president there, Andrzej Duda, has called for a permanent U.S. base on Polish soil, even suggesting last year it could be named Fort Trump.
God bless Poland and God bless America.
With some 60 nations in attendance, the two leaders will join representatives from around the globe to focus on Middle East peace and security tomorrow. But France and Germany are not sending cabinet-ranked officials. Both of those countries supported the Iran nuclear deal, and Vice President Mike Pence is expected to call out Iran after the U.S. withdrew from the pact.
As we seek to build a brighter future in the Middle East and for all freedom-loving people across the world.
The Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the fight against ISIS, and the conflicts in Syria and Yemen will also be discussed in the meeting, but many countries still view it as an Iran-centric conference. Over the next couple days, the vice president will also visit Holocaust memorials, including the site where more than 1 million Jews were murdered by Nazis at Auschwitz-Birkenau near Krakow. The emphasis today, a decades-long partnership.
We are with you. We will stand with you. And the United States of America stands with Poland as a part of the most successful mutual defense alliance in the history of the world, and we always will.
Our EWTN White House team is here traveling with the Vice President's press pool on his trip to Poland. Now, tomorrow he's meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who gave a provocative statement today in regard to this conference taking place, saying Arab representatives will be here with Israel to advance a common interest of war with Iran. Lauren?
Those are pretty strong words. Mark, the country has a rich Catholic heritage with almost 90% of the population Catholic. How are you seeing that played out?
Lauren, there are signs of the faith all over Warsaw, Poland, we're seeing. Of course, the people here have a special devotion to their native saint, John Paul II. Now, we sat down with Archbishop Gondeski. He's the president of the Polish Bishops' Conference. We'll bring you that interview tomorrow and highlight the Polish Catholicism that we're seeing. Lauren?
White House correspondent Mark Irons in Poland. Thank you, Mark. Parts of the government are set to run out of money Friday night. President Trump seems to be leaning toward agreeing to a budget deal. It would provide $1.4 billion for a border barrier, but not more than $5 billion that he wants. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi speaks to activists on both sides of the debate. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. One insider says the president has been telling people he wanted more money for the border wall, and he's worried the media is spinning it as a defeat. Now, still, many here expect the president will sign the bill, but the debate on how the country should deal with immigration isn't stopping.
This was my brother. He was 17 years old.
Shelley Wood's brother Steve was killed by immigrants in the country illegally. Today, she's urging Congress to get tough.
And I think that they have a job and a duty to protect us American citizens. I lived in Costa Rica, and I felt safer there than I do here.
The congressional compromise would fund 55 miles of new fencing on the Texas border.
It's steel, packed with concrete. It's in some areas 30 feet high, other areas 18 feet high. It absolutely is what we need to slow down, have the technology in that wall to make sure the Border Patrol can get there as quickly as possible and stop them from coming across. It can't be driven through, it can't be cut through.
But Trump ally Chris Kobach says the country needs a lot more.
If you look at the border, it's 1,933 miles. There's less than 100 miles of a barrier that will actually stop a pedestrian. There's more if you count the vehicles, but you can just hop over that if you're walking, vehicle barriers. So basically you're talking about 1,800 miles.
President Trump still hasn't committed to signing the deal, but he repeats his campaign promise.
We're going to have a great wall. It's going to be a great, powerful wall.
Not included in this deal, dreamers, those immigrants brought to the country illegally as kids. Alejandra Gonzalez-Rizzo is a college senior who dreams of teaching high school English.
When we look at building the nation in a positive direction, I think they should think about the dreamers. And I think that rather than building monuments of hate, they should look to us to build a better tomorrow.
House Democrats say an overwhelming number of their party will vote yes on the bill. But now a new hurdle. Members of the House Freedom Caucus, that's a conservative group in the House, are introducing a bill to keep the government open just 1 week. They say it's an alternative to a bad border deal. The big question, will these conservatives sway the president against the current deal? Lauren?
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi. Thank you, Jason. Joining me now is Alfonso Aguilar, president for the Latino Partnership for Conservative Principles. Alfonso, welcome back to our broadcast. Do you want to answer that question?
Well, I think it seems that the majority of Republicans in the House are going to go with this deal, are going to vote for it. And let me tell you something. We had a shutdown of over 35 days because Democrats said that the wall was immoral and they were not going to give $1 for fencing. We have a deal now that includes $1.4 billion for fencing. So the shutdown could have been avoided.
Well, what Jason was reporting is that a source is telling him that the president is upset that people are going to think that this was a defeat for him. And what you're saying is actually it's a defeat for Democrats.
Well, he prevailed. For the past months, Democrats have been saying that fencing doesn't work, that it's useless, that they were not going to give any money for fencing. He's getting $1.4 billion. And this is money till September. This is a good initial funding to begin extending the fencing, that it's absolutely necessary.
We talk a lot about DACA and the Dreamers, and we heard a woman in Jason's piece just talking about the fact that that needs to be addressed. It wasn't in this latest round of this conference.
To me, this is the most incredible thing because the Democrats here didn't get anything in return. They agreed to fencing, but they didn't get anything, not even a temporary fix for DACA and TPS recipients. Look, the president put on the table a temporary fix for DACA recipients and TPS beneficiaries. Democrats decided not to negotiate about that. And we know that there are TPS beneficiaries that are going to lose their status in a matter of weeks or months. And DACA recipients are at the mercy of the Supreme Court. And I think the Supreme Court is going to say clearly that the president can end the program. So Democrats clearly did not want to discuss this because they
knew that they weren't going to get what they wanted.
They want an issue, they don't want a solution. They can continue using the issue politically.
When I was at the border, I'll show you some of the footage, it was really quite horrific. We came into a house here that had filled with people who had come to the country illegally, who were, lying on the floor, and people came in to arrest them. There were people being arrested along the border at night as we went along. These border agents tell me they really do need a wall. So if this money that is not enough, as Republicans are saying, like Mark Meadows, head of the Freedom Caucus, What is your opinion about the political strategy of a national emergency, declaring a national emergency?
Well, what I'm hearing is that if they get the 1.4, they could complement, they could get additional money to get to the 5.7 billion that the Border Patrol says it needs to extend the necessary fencing by getting money from other agencies. The president may not need to declare a national emergency. A lot of people are telling him that's a bad strategy, would create a bad precedent, but there is money in different agencies that the appropriation is broad enough that would allow him to move that money for fencing without having Congress to have to reprogram that money. So it would be easy to transfer that money for fencing. So I think that's something that they're contemplating right now. So he may actually get the 5.7 billion that he needs.
And the government might not shut down in 48 hours. This is a never-ending saga,
Well,
it seems. So we've got to leave it there. Alfonso Aguilar, president of the Latino Partnership for Conservative Principles. We could talk all day. Thank you so much. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell will hold a vote on the Green New Deal. It's the Democrats' wide-reaching plan to try to combat climate change.
Give everybody an opportunity to go on record and see how they feel about the Green New Deal.
The proposal was the first high-profile attempt at policymaking by Democrats' new liberal wing. Republicans see it as a pipe dream that would drive the economy off the cliff. The vote might put 2020 presidential candidates in a political bind. 2 more U.S. dioceses released lists of clergy credibly accused of abuse. The first, the Archdiocese of Newark. It includes former disgraced Cardinal Theodore McCarrick, who served as Archbishop there from 1986 to 2000. McCarrick is included based on findings from an investigation by the Archdiocese of New York. Now, the Diocese of Arlington, Virginia also released a list today of priests dating back to its establishment in 1974. 5 Catholic dioceses in New Jersey have launched a compensation fund for victims of clergy sexual abuse. It will be run by a pair of experts who also worked with survivors in New York and Pennsylvania. Only victims who were abused as minors are eligible. The head of the Diocese of Covington in Kentucky says a third-party investigation has exonerated Catholic high school students. They were part of a viral video with a Native American activist in Washington, D.C. last month and were accused of harassing a Native American elder. In a letter to parents from Covington Catholic high school students, Bishop Roger Foys says in part, quote, "Our students were placed in a situation that at once was bizarre and even threatening. Their reaction to the situation was expected and one might even say laudatory." The bishop also says the investigation was done by a group with no affiliation to the school or the diocese. The head of NATO is taking aim at Russia. Jens Stoltenberg says Moscow is building missiles directly violating a critical Soviet-era treaty and threatening Europe. Now the military alliance is considering ways to counter Russia without sparking a new arms race. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee reports from the Pentagon. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. Acting Defense Secretary Pat Shanahan and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo both have their focus on Russia tonight. Shanahan is in Brussels, fresh off a trip to Afghanistan and Iraq. He's speaking with NATO allies who are worried the Russians are trying to split the alliance.
We have raised our concerns with Russia many times over the last 6 years, but those concerns were not heeded. A treaty that is only respected by one side will not keep us safe.
NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg calling Russia's new missile defense system, the SSC-8, a significant risk to Europe. During a NATO defense summit, Stoltenberg highlights the U.S. plan to leave what's called the INF Treaty. It's a 1987 agreement that's supposed to limit both the U.S. and Russia from creating certain types of cruise and ballistic missiles. Secretary Pat Shanahan and NATO allies agree Russia has crossed the line.
I think the preparation and what you outlined in terms of the INF and burden sharing is important, but also the heavy lifting that we're planned to do around readiness.
Readiness is key for the military because missiles are not the only threat. The U.S. is also concerned about Russian military presence in eastern Ukraine. 5 years ago, the Russians seized control of several regions, including Crimea.
Да и вообще, никто из вас практически не сказал о жителях Донбасса.
This week, the Russian ambassador at the United Nations sparring with his Ukrainian counterpart. Ukraine has long been at odds with separatists in the region. The rebels say the people in eastern Ukraine want to be part of Russia. UN officials say civilians are paying the highest price, with more than 3,300 killed and more than 3 million in need of humanitarian aid.
Adding to the political tension is the recent split among Orthodox Christians. The Ukrainian Orthodox Church used to be under the jurisdiction of the Russian Orthodox Church, but is now independent. The new Ukrainian church has the blessings of the Orthodox leader Bartholomew of Constantinople. The Russian Orthodox has since broke ties with him. Lauren?
Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby reporting from the Pentagon. Thank you, Wyatt. Thousands of people in Nigeria are leaving the country amid resurgence by terror group Boko Haram. Officials say there are more than 3,000 militants in Nigeria, and they are launching daily attacks. The displaced are being housed in camps in the northeast part of the country. Pope Francis has reportedly responded to Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro's request for mediation in the poverty-stricken country. In a letter obtained by an Italian newspaper, the Holy Father said the Vatican will not step in and help mediate Venezuela's political crisis. Yet, the Vatican will not comment on this letter, as it considers it a private matter. Alan Holdren is the EWTN Rome Bureau Chief. Alan, the Vatican won't officially comment, but according to the leaked letter, Pope Francis didn't flat out say no to helping. Instead, he wrote, the Vatican has conditions. What are they?
So the Vatican originally sent these conditions more than 2 years ago now. The Pope is upholding this stance. They want elections. They want the restitution of the National Assembly, like the Congress there. They want an open channel for humanitarian assistance to reach the Venezuelans. They also want the liberation of political prisoners. They said without these conditions, supported by both sides, the Maduro government and also the opposition, there's no grounds for dialogue. They can't achieve anything. So the Pope seems to be supporting that line still. You may remember that the Pope at the end of January said that he can't choose sides. He wants to be prudent, and he also wants to work as a pastor, but that he is very fearful. He said he was terrified of the possibility of bloodshed. The Pope had Nicolas Maduro, here in the Vatican for a meeting back in 2013, you may recall.
This wouldn't be the first time the Vatican has helped Venezuela. It's a country that's 96% Catholic. Tell us what the history of the Holy See's diplomatic involvement has been.
These attempts at mediation go back to 2016. The Pope tapped 2 separate archbishops to try and sit in these discussions with the Maduro government. Venezuelan bishops were also involved, and the opposition Democratic Unity. They didn't come to concretely what the Pope and the Vatican were looking for, and the Pope actually said that in his letter. He said that they didn't follow through on what was agreed on paper. So the discussions that they had back in 2016 have been stalled, and actually there was a delegation that came from the opposition party, led by the interim president, Guaido, just this week to the Vatican. And they walked away from that meeting with a top official of the Vatican Secretariat of State that leads these diplomatic efforts in the name of the Holy Father. And they said that the Pope they said that the Vatican was supportive of new elections.
So he's not taking sides, and the bishops of Venezuela have taken a very strong position against the Maduro government. So what are they saying?
Well, when Maduro basically retained power in January, they declared that his government was illegitimate. Also, Cardinal Baltasar Porras, who's the apostolic administrator of Caracas, he said in comments that the previous attempts to facilitate dialogue through the Holy See were actually made a mockery by the Maduro government. And one thing to keep in mind, Lauren, which is very interesting, is that last summer when the presidency of the Bishops' Conference of Venezuela came to visit the Pope in the Vatican, the Pope after that meeting said that the voice of his voice resounds in the voice of the Venezuelan bishops. So if they're being very hard on the ground here and he's playing hands off here, there really is a support coming from Pope Francis for those bishops.
Right, good cop, bad cop, it sort of sounds like, and it's pretty windy and noisy over there in Rome. Alan, thank you so much. Alan Holdren,
and
EWTN Cold and EWTN Rome Bureau Chief. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren.
A former Anglican priest will soon be declared a saint. Today, the Vatican announced that Pope Francis approved the canonization of Blessed John Henry Newman. Reports say the second miracle attributed to Newman involved the healing of a pregnant woman in Chicago. The London-born Newman renounced an illustrious academic career at Oxford University to become Catholic in 1845. Now, the Vatican has also put Cardinal Joseph Mindszenty in the path to beatification. He was a former primate of Hungary and was an outspoken critic of communism. For more on this story, including other church figures to be honored by the Vatican, visit our partners at CatholicNewsAgency.com. Coming up, analysis of a new poll with hopeful numbers for the pro-life movement. President Trump raised concerns with New York Governor Andrew Cuomo over the late-term abortion bill he recently signed. The two met yesterday at the White House, and the White House says the talks focused mainly on taxes. Lawmakers in New York are not the only ones proposing extreme abortion legislation. New Mexico's House of Representatives passed a bill that would decriminalize the state's inactive ban on abortion. A proposal in Vermont would make abortion a right up until birth. Yet a new poll finds a majority of Americans strongly oppose third trimester abortions. The poll, conducted by the nonpartisan firm YouGov, finds 80% of those surveyed strongly oppose abortion the day before a child is born. 79% strongly oppose abortion in the entire third trimester of pregnancy. Joining me now is Kristen Day, Executive Director of Democrats for Life of America. Kristen, welcome back to our broadcast.
Thank you for having me on again.
We are used to seeing legislative action take a long time, but it seems like efforts to move forward with pro-abortion agendas, especially since the New York law was passed, are moving at lightning speed. Why is that?
It is unbelievable how fast people are pushing this extreme legislation when clearly a majority of the nation does not agree with it.
Well, isn't that interesting? Because as the Executive Director for Democrats for Life of America, how do you think that that poll information can be used to stop the legislation at the state level?
Right. We really need to get that information out more, because a lot of people just automatically go along with the groupthink mentality where we have to protect a woman's right to choose, and they bring up these extreme cases where, in these heart-wrenching cases where women are experiencing, their life is endangered or things like that. So they bring up these extreme cases to pull at the heartstrings of people to pass this legislation that is, in effect, dangerous for women.
How can the pro-life movement turn this data that we have now from this poll that really shows that they're defining that third trimester as something that they don't think should happen? Bill Clinton, what did Bill Clinton say back in the day?
Safe, legal, and rare.
Safe, legal, and rare. And yet we're seeing the Democrat platform as the most pro-abortion platform we have ever seen.
We really need to bring back the human side of this equation. Right now, the abortion and women affected by abortion are being used as pawns in this effort to win elections and keep the abortion business in going and making money for them. And we really need to bring back the human side and really see how women are affected. And most women who seek abortion do so because they're poor, they can't afford it, their husbands or boyfriends are pressuring them. They're not doing this because they want to. They feel like there are no other options. So I think as the pro-life movement, we really need to reach out and be more compassionate and show our compassionate side and do more to really talk about the women affected.
But there are so few pro-life Democrats. How do you message to them?
We don't need to message to the pro-life Democrats. They're true, they're real, and they believe that all life is worthy of protection. Our big challenge is trying to reach out to those who don't understand the truth of abortion and what it does. And even when we had some of our people call some of the New York legislators, and they were confused about what they voted for. They didn't realize that the third-term abortion ban was more extreme, and it would allow abortion for any reason.
Kristen Day, Executive Director of Democrats for Life. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Up next, the president of Microsoft and Pope Francis, plus the Holy Father's advice on how to pray. A recent study says Christian millennials believe sharing their faith publicly in the hopes of converting someone of a different religion is wrong. The Barna Group, which examines the intersection of culture and faith, finds 47% of millennials say it's at least somewhat wrong to evangelize. That's significantly higher than other age groups. Roughly 1/4 of Generation X says it's wrong, as do less than 1 in 5 baby boomers. Pope Francis often meets with presidents of countries. Today, he met with the president of Microsoft. Brad Smith and the Holy Father talked about artificial intelligence, particularly how it can be used for the common good. The company is going to team with the Pontifical Academy of Life to promote an international prize on ethics in AI. And finally, tonight, Pope Francis tells the faithful there is no I in the Our Father.
Sea santificado tu nombre, venga tu reino.
At his weekly talk to pilgrims at the Vatican, the Holy Father says the main words are your and our, not me and my. He also says to be honest in prayer, because trying to be a hypocrite with God will not work. Instead, the best appeals ask for help for those around us who are suffering. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Let's keep in touch online. Follow me at Lauren Ashburn on Twitter and Lauren Ashburn EWTN on Facebook. Good night, and God bless you.